Hi, Yinnies, and welcome back to a Yin Yoga Podcast. If you are new around here, welcome. Thanks for joining. And for those of you that have been here for a while, welcome back. I have a guest interview today. We're going to talk to someone about a fantastic book. I will get to that in just a moment. But before I do, I wanted to say, if you've been listening for a while and you have not yet subscribed or followed the podcast and or offered a review, I would be super grateful if you would take 2 minutes of your time to give me some stars on the Spotify app, or if you're on Apple, you could do stars and write a written review. I would really, really appreciate your review. So if you've been loving the podcast, if you've been finding it helpful with your teaching, or even if you're not a teacher, please take a moment, give me some 5 stars. I would be super grateful. This just helps to show the algorithms that this podcast is actually getting listened to and enjoyed. And so they're more likely to show it to other people that are searching for Yin Yoga podcasts or for yoga podcasts. Thank you ever so much for that. Okay, my friends, today we have a guest interview with Stephanie Nosco. I'll read you her bio. And she recently, not that long ago, put out a book, which we're going to talk about today. I've read it. It's amazing. Here it is. For those of you that are on YouTube, you can see it. If you're not on YouTube and you want to see the cover of the book, because it's stunning, by the way, you can always just hop over to the full show notes, which is on my blog. There's a link wherever you're listening to this, and you can see images and such there. Let me introduce you to today's guest. Stephanie is a psychotherapist, somatic educator, and dedicated practitioner and student of Qigong, yoga, Chinese medicine, Buddhism, and depth psychology. Residing on beautiful Vancouver Island, so technically we live on the same island. I didn't even know that. She draws inspiration from her dreams, nature, and the wisdom of the 5 elements to explore the complexities of the human experience. Her teaching approach weaves together ancient wisdom and modern practices, making abstract concepts relatable and accessible. As a teacher on Glow, which is formerly Yoga Glow, she shares Qigong practices with a global audience and leads silent Qigong and meditation retreats worldwide. Stephanie is also the author of Follow Your Dao. That's the beautiful book that I'm holding up if you're watching the video. If not, you can see it on my blog. That introduces the physical, psychological, and spiritual functions of the 5 element primary organs of Chinese medicine. Additionally, she conducts comprehensive teacher training programs in Chinese energetics, equipping yoga instructors, body workers, and therapists to work more deeply at the spiritual level of health. All right, so that's a little bit about Stephanie. And when you hear from me next, I will be with Stephanie. Just a reminder, dear listeners, that this is an adult podcast with adult subject matter and adult language. That myself and some of my guests have souls of mermaids, but mouths of sailors. So if you have little people around, please put some headphones on now. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
This is very exciting. One, because I just completely read your book and nerded out. So that's exciting. But also what a lot of the listeners don't know probably is that we actually come from the same city and province. And now we both have moved away from there and we live on the same island, which I didn't even know until I read the book.
Kind of a weird coincidence, but also
very weird.
Yeah.
But very cool. Yeah.
Very cool.
So that's awesome. And I think it's funny because anyone who's Canadian listening to this, or maybe anyone who lives in a smaller area, whether it's Scotland or Ireland or, because I feel like being a Canadian, the US gets like so much more fanfare and American authors and teachers and et cetera. And there's so many more of them, Americans, than there are of us, that anytime I'm like with a fellow Canadian and we're talking, I'm just like, oh my God, and you're Canadian. Like, it's like this extra excited thing.
Yeah,
And I have a
Totally.
feeling it's probably the same for someone if they were in Scotland, because they're probably
Right.
used to everyone being from the from England, that they're like, oh my God. So that's kind of a fun history. And I'm very excited to dive into talking about your book in a bit,
Mhm.
and your work. But I know for a fact that yoga teachers love to hear other yoga teachers' origin stories. So I would
Yes.
love to hear. Let's start with maybe like, how did you find yoga?
Okay. Yeah. Story time. Stories are important. Okay. Well, I found yoga at a very young age. I was a competitive athlete, believe it or not. I came from a background in track and field and running. And I think part of the reason why I was drawn to running was because I had so much angst in my youth.
Mm,
Dealt with ADHD, depression, and anxiety. And so running was a way, I think, from running from myself. So I really was running competitively. And my coach, one of my running coaches, was like, you should do yoga. And my mom was doing it at the time. So I was like, okay, that's cool. And I remember going to yoga and feeling something that I hadn't felt before in my life that I knew was connected with breath.
mm,
And it was young, 15, 16 years old. And then what happened, I went to university and I kept running. I was running competitively there, varsity track and field and cross country. And I ran so hard that my feet broke. I got stress fractures all through my feet
oh,
and my
ouch.
my ankles. And so I actually couldn't run anymore. And this was kind of an identity crisis for me. It was like, well, who am I when I stop running from myself?
Mm-hmm.
And so I really had to look at like all of my what I now label as trauma, but all of my this unconscious material was kind of bubbling up. Um, and I had doctors and psychologists and psychiatrists try and label that as manic depression and this all these labels were kind of coming at
Mm-hmm.
me. And I was in a low point, like a very low point in my life. And I remembered how I felt in that yoga class. And I was like, there's something there. I think it's in yoga. And at the same time, so this was kind of happening. So I started doing more yoga in my room at university. And at the same time, I was taking an intro to religious studies course.
Mm,
And I had the most amazing professor who we had a small class, but I remember it wasn't that small, maybe 50, 60 people. And I remember when she walked into the room, the very first time I met her, she took the time to look at everybody in the eye.
mm,
And when she looked at me in the eye, I was like, I felt like seen and I felt her presence. And there was something like I couldn't touch it, I couldn't name it, but I was like, I want that. There's something there. And I was the same thing that I felt in yoga. So there was these two poles of the religious studies, and she was deeply into Buddhism and the religions of India, and she talked about yoga, and I was discovering yoga as like a pathway back to myself after this running thing. And so I dove right in. I dove into yoga, and I got my teacher training at 19 years old. I went and I got my 200 hour. And because I was living, I did my university. I took my university at St. Francis Xavier in Nova Scotia. It was a small little town, and they had no other yoga teachers. Like literally, I think there was like one other yoga teacher at the time. And so right away, I started teaching like 5 classes a week, and I had no idea what I was doing. 200 hour. Um, and then I went to India and I studied more yoga, traveled around India, and I found Yin. So that's when I found Yin Yoga.
in
And I did
India.
in India. It was so random. I was at
That
this
is so
ash.
random.
Okay, I was at this ashram studying Kundalini yoga. I was doing Kundalini yoga, Hatha yoga, and there was a guy there who was visiting. He wasn't even a teacher at the ashram. He wasn't even a yogi or whatever. And I guess he just taught a guest class. And he's like, we're going to do this thing called yin. And I'm like, whoa, okay. And he had us in like Paschimottanasana, like snail pose or whatever. or not snail, caterpillar for like 6 minutes or 7 minutes. And I was like, again, it was one of those things that, or I really had to stop running from myself. Like even with the yoga, right? I was doing vinyasa yoga, I was doing hatha
Yep.
yoga, I was doing kundalini yoga. It was
It's
very
very
much like
different. Yeah.
I was still that momentum of like running from myself, but yin was like, stop now though, and like look and feel. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
something in me was like, there's something here that I need to explore more deeply. So when I returned from India, I signed up for Bernie Clark's training, which is in
Mm-hmm.
Vancouver, as you know. And I did his training, and then I found Sarah Powers.
Mm-hmm.
And I did every training that Sarah offered. I followed her around the world. Um, and I at also kind of rekindled my interest for Buddha Dharma. So I also
Mm-hmm.
started
Mm-hmm.
doing long silent retreats. So I did long silent retreats. I was studying Yin. I was teaching Yin, and that's kind of how I got into yoga. If that's
That's very cool.
kind of
I
a long roundabout answer, but
Yeah. No, I had a very similar feeling the very first yoga class that I ever took. Um, and I hadn't made the connection that it was to breath. All I knew is that for that 90 minutes, I wasn't anxious.
mm,
And then when I left, I was just like, I'm gonna do yoga forever.
never.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was totally bullied in. I had zero interest in going. I just went because my friends wanted to do this beginner yoga course. And I was like rolling my eyes the whole time. And
Right.
I was the only one that it stuck. It's like
That's
they were
so
like,
funny.
yay, 6 weeks. That was fun. Let's do a cooking class. And I was like, no, yoga forever, you know?
Hmm.
So that is very cool. That you would be in India. This is where it's like, the woo-woo part of me is like, fate that you happen to suddenly come across like a yin yoga class in
I
India.
know, in India. And then I was traveling around India, and what would I do? Like, I didn't practice really what I learned at that ashram. I was practicing yin in my room. Like, I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, and when I got home, same. It was like, and so that's, yeah, it really had a big impact on me. It was the stopping and the slowing down, and maybe even the permission to do that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And
yeah.
I liked that you mentioned sort of that discomfort as well of having to slow down
Hmm.
and like not being able to outrun,
Hmm.
the thoughts, the
Hmm.
feelings, the whatever's going on, but that it's like, no, you're going to sit your butt here and you're going
Yeah.
to just notice all this stuff that comes up.
Yeah. And it was like really opening my eyes to my inner world that, and it was a slow doorway from running to, vinyasa yoga to like the Kundalini yoga. And then it was like yin. It was like taking a magnifying glass on this whole inner landscape that I'd been running from my whole life. Um, and then I really started getting into the Buddha Dharma and sitting long retreats,
Mm-hmm.
um, which that is now the doorway into the Qigong. So I don't know if you want me to
Yeah,
continue the story.
let's segue there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So um, I would sit these long retreats, and as you know, when you're sitting with unprocessed material, uh, things can happen. You can experience different, what we would call in Buddhism, jhana states. So these different mind states that start to arise, and as well as bring up energies from the past that I didn't really have the tools at all to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And a good friend of mine, Carly Forrest, do you know her? Do you know Carly
Only
Forrest?
via like we've connected online, but I've never met her in person yet.
So I actually met her in New York. Actually, no, I met her in Hawaii at one of Sarah's retreats, and then we reconnected in New York at one of her trainings. And I was telling her what was happening a bit with my energy. I just didn't feel fully grounded. Like there was
Mm-hmm.
something missing in my
Mm-hmm.
practice. And she's like, I think that you should try medical Qigong. And she was studying with Noel on the island.
Mm.
Yeah. And simultaneously, I'd found Qigong in Calgary. Was it Yoga MCC? Do you remember that
Yes.
studio?
Yep. I think they're
Yeah,
still
there's
around.
kind of
Yeah.
like a basement
Yes.
area.
Downstairs, little
Yeah,
den. Yeah.
downstairs, little den, and they had a qigong with Manira, and she did the Spring Forest qigong. And so I remember I was kind of doing it with her and having some profound experiences. And then Carly was like, "You should try this medical qigong to balance out your energy." And um, I loved it. I signed up right away, and I loved it because I don't know how yin yoga trainings are now, but when I learned the meridian system from Sarah, it just felt incomplete. It
Mm-hmm.
felt like we're just mapping meridians, and I was like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
get it though.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it though. Like, tell me more. What is actually happening with my energy? What do you mean that the liver relates to the inner thigh, but like also more, please? And so medical qigong answered a lot of those questions for me. And yeah,
Let's
I
pause
became
there for a second.
yeah.
I was going to say, I had a very similar experience with Paul.
Mm,
So that's who I've done all my yin training with, where he did introduce us to the meridians. Um, but it was just like, okay, here's where they are.
mhm.
And I was just like, and,
Yeah.
like I was like, I feel like we barely grazed the surface. But I do want to say, and this is not a knock to any of these three teachers, but
No.
some of the kind of primary yin teachers that a lot of us have studied with, if they're talking about meridians, they actually haven't studied them in depth, meaning they haven't gone to Chinese medicine school. They're not a Chinese medicine practitioner. So what they're presenting to you is sort of information they may have learned in a quick course or in a book. It's not from deeper study. And so
Mhm.
they can't really give you
Mhm.
the more of, okay, here's my liver meridian
Mhm.
and now what,
Mhm.
because they haven't studied it in depth. So
Mhm.
I actually think it's wise of them not to try
Yes.
to do more, because I think
Mhm.
if you haven't studied it, then, talking about it can be beyond that, can be problematic. I actually secretly just wish, and this is what's not a secret now because I'm about to say it, that any of the teachers and those ones that I adore, all of them, Sarah, Bernie, and Paul, I
Yeah.
think they're all amazing humans. I kind of wish that they just didn't offer it at all.
Mhm.
That they just stuck to, like with Sarah, the Buddha Dharma is really her thing. Just
It
one of the
is.
reasons that I adore her as a teacher, because I'm also Buddhist.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to come out of the Buddhist closet. Even
Mhm.
before yoga, I was reading my very first book that I bought on Buddhism because I was very curious about it, was like Zen koans. And I just
That's
remember reading
amazing.
it going, I don't understand any of this, but yet something was piqued.
Mhm.
And so then years of, reading and then eventually finding a teacher. So I've always really loved that part of her thing. And, and Bernie's got this amazing, like, kind of nerdy niche that he has. Like, I mean, he goes down the rabbit
Yes.
holes and finds all the
Yes.
studies and,
Yes.
like, and
Here's what's happening to your mitochondria. Like,
right. Yeah.
okay.
And so it's like, I kind of
Yeah.
almost wished at some point that, like, they would just hone in on
Yes.
their genius and kind of just
Uh-huh.
leave the Chinese medicine
Mhm.
aside.
Mhm.
Because I feel like people that are there are going to want more. Well, okay, let's just say this. The people that are forever students and that are really humble are going to hear what they say and want more.
Mhm.
And then they're probably going to run off and go study it. But there are a lot of teachers that hear that tiny little surface amount, and then they just immediately replicate that into their weekly classes, into their workshops, or into their teacher trainings when they also don't have. So, I mean, I know there's teachers out there teaching Chinese medicine who their teacher hadn't even studied it. And so
Mhm.
I just think it can get really, in the yoga verse, there can be a lot of hubris,
Yes.
with these things, instead of the humility to go, okay, that really piqued my interest. Now, therefore, I must go study. I must go
Mhm.
dive deep. I must, yeah, yeah. Instead of like, I'm going to immediately start sharing this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that we can lose a lot of the magic of
Yes.
of the medicine when we take something literally so surface as a meridian and be like, well, that's what we're doing when we do stretch when we stretch.
And I
Um,
would argue, not a popular opinion, that
mhm.
actually the meridian location for yin is less important than the sinew location.
It's the sinew channels that will
And
really affect
if you
it.
say to most people, you know, like I'm actually currently reading Bernie's book again because I want to invite him on the podcast. So I thought, well, I read his book like, I don't know, 15 years ago. I better reread it before I bring him on. And then found out he had an even newer version. So then I got like all the way through his older version and bought the new one. So I'm still rereading it. But yeah, they're not mentioned there. Paul never talked to us about the sinew channels. I'm guessing that Sarah probably didn't. And to me, those are far more important to yoga professionals than the meridian. It's meridian, like knowing the pathway, seeing it. That's nice to know information. It's fun. It's like good stuff to put in our back pocket and it's interesting, but really understanding where is the sinew channel is going to be far more effective, I think. And that's what I focus more on in my training. We kind of talk about the meridian very loosely, like literally I'm like, here it is, here's where it goes, slide, next slide, sinew channel. Yeah.
And that's exactly right. And I mean, aside from I found acupressure can be really a nice addition to yin yoga practice. But aside from that, we're not applying needles. So to me, when I read, Ted Kapchuk's, The Web That Has No Weaver, and there was a few other Chinese medicine books that Sarah referenced, it was like, this isn't relevant to me. Like, I'm not treating someone. I'm not treating someone with needles. I'm teaching what I now know is a Dao Yin, which is an internal form of Qigong, which really all Yin Yoga is internal Qigong. Qigong meaning a form of energy skill, or Dao Yin meaning leading and guiding the energy. That's what we're doing. And so then to me, what felt more relevant was, how do we lead and guide energy? Basic principles of energy movement. That's what I'm teaching. The meridian location, that's just something that you can Google. Sinew channel location. Okay, you can Google that. And I still have to Google it because I'm not an acupuncturist. I don't, you know. But to me, what becomes more relevant is, how do we teach and empower people how to actually move their chi, move the energy.
And unless you are going to do acupressure as part of your yin training, which those three that I just mentioned wouldn't, because it's not their thing.
No.
Then the point by point location of a meridian, not relevant. Kind of knowing the general pathway, far more important. So I did study point by point location in depth.
Good for you.
the course that almost killed me when I studied Chinese medicine. That and energetics. Ooh, wow. But of course, as soon as you stop using it, a lot of it goes away, so it's like, I know some of the really common popular points, but I couldn't, I couldn't give you by rote point by point location like I could when I was in school. But that isn't relevant as, like, well, where does the liver sinew channel run? And then would that help you decide maybe what poses you might do to support your liver? Maybe, maybe not. The other thing I think that is so commonly, and I catch my students, this is why this year it's going to come up, the next time I meet my students, they'll have already graduated by the time this comes live, but I'm actually going to make everyone raise their right hand and swear that they will not pseudo-diagnose their students with Chinese medicine before we get into because I teach it from an element perspective.
All right.
Yeah. So it's like, here are the meridians that go along with wood and spring and, but because I even with people who have taken my course and on mentorship with me, I've seen them in groups answer questions from somebody like, I'm working with one-on-one with a student and she's grieving right now. And I'm wondering what yin poses I can do. And one of my former students chimes in with all of the stuff to like blast your heart open poses. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, slow your roll here a little bit. Like, yes, lung grief. However, can we please acknowledge that grief is a circular process? And, she may not be the student of yours ready to start blasting her heart open at this point. She may need to do the opposite. She may need to tuck in for a while, so I think that sometimes as yoga teachers can be really well intentioned, but they take a little snippet out of a training and they use it like a Band-Aid. They're
Right.
almost using it like how pharmaceutical companies do with like, oh, have a headache? Here's a pill. It's like,
Hmm.
no, back up, back up, back up.
Yeah.
And the thing I love about Chinese medicine is this whole root and branch concept
Hmm.
that like, yes, we are going to talk about the symptomology, but we're going to trace back to, but well, why is that happening? And that's
Hmm.
where we're going to spend so much time, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's also like knowing that Qigong, I found it interesting to learn that Qigong is a relatively new term, before they called it the Daoyans, and this whole
I
idea that
love that.
Qigong was actually how to preserve the life force is what it
Mm-hmm.
was. It was preserving the life force. And so it never really was, here's what's wrong with me and here's what you do to fix it. It was always like, well, how can we preserve the life force, meaning boost the chi to impact the entire immune system that's going to naturally fight off whatever it is. Like
Yeah.
chi is adaptogenic. It doesn't
How can we bring
necessarily
you into a state of
a
harmony?
balance,
Yeah.
right?
So
So
that
you
your
have
body is doing it. Yeah.
exactly. So you have to look at the whole thing. And then like what I've been recently learning is like this medical qigong thing actually came later when
Interesting.
the Chinese government came in and wanted to separate Taoism and the spiritual side of
Mm-hmm.
qigong into medical, and how to, in some ways sanitize it and also justify its medical relevance and say, okay, now this is the disease that you have. Here's some exercises to do that are very prescriptive. And
And
well,
they
I
did the
think that
same thing with Chinese medicine
yes,
acupuncture, you know?
exactly.
So what was Chinese medicine, which was very, I mean, China is a huge country too. So each
Huge.
region would have had
Has
their
their
own
own
kind of special sauce
medicine.
that they were
Yep.
doing, right? Based on where they lived and the climate there and
Hmm.
those people. And, when it got Maoified, basically they just took
Malified.
like the
Yep.
center of it and kind of was like,
Yes.
this is traditional Chinese medicine and this is what we will export. And so much of it has been left
So
behind.
much. So
Yeah.
much. And so
Yeah.
this has been my inquiry lately is
Me
how do
too.
I know it's even true?
Hmm.
I've studied with many different teachers, and it's kind of like looking at qigong and yin yoga from all of these different lenses, like all of these different
Hmm.
angles. And what one teacher says will be totally different from what another teacher says. And so it's
Yeah.
kind of like then I get this question like, well, what's true then? What's true then if we've lost the purity from the ancient times, right?
Yeah.
But then it's also like, well, we don't live in the ancient times either.
Yeah.
We have different problems. And so how do
Yeah.
we pull? Lately it's been for me like what is really relevant as yin teachers and as people who are teaching Dao Yin, or how to guide the energy skillfully, is those basic principles of the energy, like the five elements, right? The
Yeah.
five elements being the most ancient archetypes of the way energy moves, of the way emotions move. Like to me, that's the most relevant thing that I want to empower people with.
That makes so much sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. I just very recently, um, because I've always said that the learnings and the teachings that I have in Chinese medicine were TCM, because the college that I studied at was largely TCM, although there was definitely other more just kind of Chinese medicine and five element courses. Like we did have a whole, five element section, which was a kind of a different way of seeing things. And that's actually when I really fell in love with Chinese medicine. I loved
Mhm.
the TCM stuff. I found it fascinating. Yin Yang theory to me made sense right away. I was just like, well, of course, this is
Mhm.
brilliant. Um, and so a lot of it made sense, but the soul of it didn't
Mhm.
hit me till I took the five element course. And then I was like, oh my God, my heart is singing. Like, this is
Mhm.
so beautiful.
Mhm.
Um, and I've recently been, because even though I'm not a Chinese medicine practitioner at this point, I'm always listening to TCM podcasts or Chinese medicine podcasts and like reading things. And like, I'm just, very tunnel vision that way. And recently I've been listening to a lot of people that call themselves Chinese medicine practitioners, and they leave the tea off and really
Mhm.
starting to learn kind of what is the difference between this traditional Chinese medicine that was been kind of Maoified and taught
Mhm.
in our schools so that you can get a license so that you can put needles in people versus this kind of far bigger picture,
Broader.
older system,
Mhm.
and those elements that have been left out
Yes.
in this sort of licensing, training people method.
Mhm.
I'm not a big fan of, I mean, I get that, you know, perhaps it's smart to have licenses if you're going to put needles in people, but one thing I know for sure, having watched other friends in other professions over the years move from being not licensed to licensed, is how much gets lost as soon as you need to codify things and license things. It just feels like a lot of the magic gets left behind.
Mhm.
And also the practitioner's ability to use their intuition to help the person in front of them,
Yes.
because they have these sort of rigid structures that they have to
Mhm.
follow now.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. So you started practicing Qigong.
Started practicing Qigong. Yeah, I started
And
practicing
where
Qigong.
did you find a teacher? Did you
I
just kind of
found,
on
yeah,
the
so,
interwebs?
well, well, it was Carly who told me about Noelle, who teaches medical Qigong. And so this is actually one thing I want to say about Qigong so that, um, just to clarify, because a lot of people don't realize that, you know, there's kind of two branches of medical Qigong. There's the external Qigong, and then there's the internals. So the internal meaning I'm doing Qigong exercises to move the Qi myself. That can be an external form, like those flowing movements that you see people do in the park. That's an external Weigong form. And then the internal Neidong, which is how we're moving the Qi internally with meditation practices, both can be happening at the same time. So those are all internal forms. And then the external is like, now I'm going to give a Qigong treatment on the table. A lot of people don't know that this even exists, but it's kind of like Reiki.
And that's what I had experienced only
Yes.
once, and had my mind completely blown. Like I
It's
was
really powerful. Yeah, it's
so
very
so
powerful.
powerful. It was more powerful than any acupuncture treatment I've ever had.
Yes. And what I love about the program that Noelle and my teacher Wendy run is you really learn how to work one-on-one with people, see their whole person, body, mind, and spirit. And you know, it is the external treatment that you get, but it's also, okay, now based on what I know about this person on all these levels, physical, emotional, and spiritual, what kind of internal practices can I give them?
Yes.
And so I took Wendy's full program, the 4 years, and now I'm on this other quest of really realizing that my Dao is about empowering people to learn the internals. Because I'm a
Yes.
yogi. That's how
Yeah.
I began, is like that sitting with myself, stop running from myself, and look inside of how I can impact my Qi on a daily basis.
Right.
Because like what I wrote in my book is, yes, Qigong is getting a treatment and practicing your forms, but then what are you doing for the other 23 hours in your day?
Exactly.
That is going to impact your Qi more than anything. It's the little tiny habits.
Yeah.
So I started practicing Qigong and I started leading retreats and offering Qigong on retreats, and people were having freaking breakdowns. And I
Oh,
realized I am not prepared to guide people into their psyche like this. And so I took my master's in counseling, which was
good for you.
also like a really good experience. I thought that I was going to, I'm going to be a psychotherapist and have a practice, which I do, I do see clients one-to-one, but I keep coming back to that. My Dao is really about teaching and inspiring people through my own practice and presence, through writing and through teaching, empowering people to do their own work.
It's interesting that you're talking about this bridge of like, when you're working one-on-one with somebody, yes, you are, doing your part as the practitioner with the touching and the all of the things, but that then you're sending them home with these other practices. It's very similar to when I made the movement from being a yoga teacher to a yoga therapist. That was the one of the big things when you work with people privately. If you're a yoga teacher and you're not working with people therapeutically and you're doing a private session, you could just take any class plan you have out of your book and you're just teaching it one-on-one. It's not custom. It's not based on that person's needs. But as soon as you start to become interested in these therapeutic aspects, or, become a yoga therapist, now you're doing a full assessment, all of these things with the person, and everything that you're giving them is based on their own needs. And you are sending them home with homework. You know, one of my a yoga therapist friend often says, like, if you're doing yoga therapy right, you're trying to work yourself out of a job.
Yes.
Like you're trying to give them the tools to empower themselves to do it themselves.
Mhm.
Now, not to say that this hands-on medical qigong isn't crazy powerful, because it is, but that's only that hour that they see you, and like you
Mhm.
said, then they leave, and if they just go back out into the world and they haven't taken any of these lessons into their body or into their lifestyle, then it's going to be kind of like one step forward, two steps back the whole time.
You can't ground the change,
Yeah.
right? And that's one of the things that I struggled with going to acupuncture is I love getting needles, but they put all these needles in, they leave you in a dark room, and then they take them out and you leave. And it's like, but can you give like what points are you needling? Like
Yeah,
what
yeah,
did you
yeah.
find in my pulse? I want to know the why, and that's just me. And I know, but I do know that there's other people that are interested in their health and they're interested in
Yes.
the why.
Yeah.
And I'm deeply interested in the why. And when I share about the emotions and the organs, it's people are interested in their bodies. They want to
Yeah.
know what's happening in there.
Yeah. It's
Um,
funny when you said that, because I'm the same way. I'll actually be getting needled, trying to balance the relax and just enjoy this treatment with, is that stomach 36 you just did?
yeah,
Like
exactly.
it's yeah, it's hard to
Oh,
turn
liver
off
three.
that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's like, oh, Hagu, good old Hagu again,
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I totally get that. And I also have students that I know aren't even remotely interested in that.
Right.
Like I have students that will come to my classes and they are more than happy to come to 3 classes a week. Um, and that's their yoga. They don't
Mhm.
practice it at home initially, although it does start to sneak its way in, when they're about to blow up with their partner about who did the dishes, they remember that breath technique that I taught them, or, so it
Mhm.
does filter in slowly, but not everybody has the desire or the time to
Yes.
kind of have like this full practice that I wish everybody would do, where it's like,
Mhm.
carve out an hour, roll out your mat, light some incense.
Yeah.
Let's spend this hour with yourself.
And this is actually one of the things that I started realizing when I started dripping Qigong slowly into my teaching was that it was so accessible.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need a mat, you don't need clothes, you don't actually need that much time. It's
Yeah.
like
You can do a few
so
things.
portable. You can literally do like 15 minutes, less than 15 minutes, 8 minutes, and you
Yeah.
can experience a pretty powerful shift. So that was really cool. And in combination with the psychotherapy that I was doing, it was, yeah, it was kind of integrating really nicely. And then because I was studying the mind and the psychotherapy as well as Qigong, I was really interested in the spirit dimensions of the organs, which maybe we can get into a bit later. So the Wuxing, the 5 elements, and then the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wuxian, which is the 5 spirit energies. I met my teacher, Lori Deshar, which if you haven't worked with her before, she's just freaking amazing. She's a 5 element acupuncturist and a depth psychologist, or she's not a depth psychologist, but she's studied a lot of depth psychology. And yeah, and she totally opened my mind to another layer of,
I've already put her book on my wish list because you mentioned it.
ugh,
This is how nerdy I am. Those of you on YouTube can see this. So here's Stephanie's book. You can already
yeah,
see all the little purple tabbies with
yeah,
notes on them. Some of them are, oh my God, look at this book. Some of them are, ask her this question. Some of them are, read this part out, whatever they happen to be. But I think there was at least 2 books that you mentioned in here that I was like, right away, I was like, and I use my Amazon wish list, not necessarily that I'm going to buy it from Amazon. I usually prefer to try to source it elsewhere, but I use it almost just as like a library list of
as a
like,
library.
to
Oh
keep
yeah, to
track of
read.
all the books, because I used to do it in my phone. And then one time my phone crashed and all the books that I'd put in there were gone. And so,
Hmm.
yeah. So I've already got her book on my
Yeah.
wish list waiting.
But yeah, so she really taught me how to look at the organs, just another layer of detail. Like if we can come back to that example that you gave with the grief. So, what's happening to that person's spirit? Somebody in grief is there's 2 things happening. Is it okay if I go into an example?
Totally. Please do.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a couple of things happening. The first thing is shock.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we know about shock is that the Shen, which is lives in our heart, it's like our mind. The Shen is like a little bird. You can see it on the cover of the book. It's a little bird, and when there's a trauma like that, like a sudden loss, any loss, the Shen will disassociate from the body. So it'll kind of fly up.
Yeah.
And so shock it's one of those things that, yes, we do want to bring the Shen back into the body, right? Because it's in a state of disassociation. But why it's in disassociation is because there's so much pain in the lungs. And loss is one of those things that needs to be titrated. We can't just like go right into the grief. Okay. It's too much. And that's why the Shen is leaving the body. It kind of is like, I can't handle this right now. So when I'm working with people with grief, it is about, yes, it's about supporting the lungs because the lungs are going to be compromised. But it's also about slowly inviting the Shen to come back into the heart, but then also giving it permission to leave.
Yeah.
And like I worked with someone just recently on this. She's going through a painful separation. I said, no, like it's okay to distract yourself. Let your Shen, let your mind leave your body and then come in and then go and then come in. And so this is like working with the spirits really helped me to see this, and that it's not always because you're working with, the lungs and grief. It's not always like you want to blast open your heart, or you don't actually always want to be in your body. Sometimes you have to leave.
Yeah. I think that
makes
sometimes, again, these things get oversimplified, right?
Yes.
They get a little bit of information and they forget
Yes.
that like, actually this is a whole system that all of the organs are working together.
Yeah,
and even if you look at just kind of even pop psychology, when they talk, I mean, they usually mention the stages of grief, but I've always been like, that makes it sound like it's like a lateral line. It's not, it's a circle. It's like, and denial is one of them.
Denial is one of them.
It's like that. This can't be happening. I can't believe. That's when that Shen is just like, nope, I'm out of here. This isn't happening. This isn't real. Yeah.
And so, but also to work with it, not being like, we don't actually have to force it back in right away. It's like, it takes a lot of gentleness and then supporting the other organs, right? Supporting the kidneys and supporting the lungs. Yes, those things are important. But you have to look at it as a whole system. So,
yeah. And that's, I think, so my hope is that when yoga teachers hear this, that they realize that, try not to use tools that you don't have in-depth study with, if you have a client who's grieving, you don't have to pull out your lung meridian knowledge. You can just pull out, I'm a human, I've lost something too, knowledge, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you started studying, did you start with kind of just mostly like the physical shapes of Qigong and then move into kind of more medical, or did you do it all together?
I did it kind of all together. I started with Wendy, with the Wendy and Noel lead a kind of a 3-year program, and it was interrupted with COVID. But you begin learning forms, the Taoist 5 set of forms, concurrently with learning about the physical, energetic, and spiritual aspects of the 5 viscera, the organs. And you're also learning treatments. And so it kind of all happens at one time.
Beautiful.
And at the same time, I was also kind of dabbling in other forms of Qigong with different teachers. There's a great teacher, Master Helen Liang in Vancouver, that I was working with. So I was just kind of pulling from, I guess, different areas and like looking at this subject of Qigong the way you would look at a crystal from many angles. And so
beautiful.
Yeah.
I've done not a lot, but mostly, other than that one medical Qigong session, I've done mostly sort of the physical shapes of the Qigong. And I really, really love them because as someone who's been practicing yoga a long time, I found that, well, first of all, I found when I started doing Qigong in college, my Qigong teacher kept telling me to shorten my stance. Because of course, as yogis, we're like long warrior strides and like all these, and he's like, no, like shorter, like you don't have stability there, like bring your legs in. And that was a big light bulb to be able to do these practices of Qigong in a way that I was never going to my extreme ever. Like I was never from the outside, if I was watching myself, looking like I was exerting or challenging myself like I would in a physical asana practice, especially those that are listening that come from these really strong physical practices like Ashtanga and Vinyasa. There was never any of that kind of efforting.
Mhm.
And yet I would get so warm. Like there was
Yeah.
times where I'd be doing it, I'd be like, oh, and this shirt's coming off. And like, how am I getting so warm when it's, to a yogi's eye, I've
Total
barely moved, you
moved.
know? Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons I fell in love with Qigong, and why I also found it so challenging was it was like, okay, Yin Yoga forced me, that's a harsh way to say it, but encouraged me to stop running. But now Qigong was like, okay, now can you move your body without over efforting? Like
It's hard
my
to do
Qigong,
when you're used to other
right,
practices. Yeah.
right. And what my Qigong teacher always says is try easier. Where can you try easier? And knowing, like, when I first started practicing a lot of Qigong, the standing Wuji was so hard for me. I was like shaking. I had to sit in a chair. And I thought, like, why is this hard for me? I'm an athlete. like,
Mm-hmm,
like I
mm-hmm,
come from running background, climbing. I was always very athletic, but to just stand, it's because the chi in the bones, like my chi hadn't built yet. And I hadn't actually learned how to stack my bones so that I
mm-hmm,
wasn't over efforting just when I'm standing. Like
mm-hmm.
it was such an embodied Taoist practice, right? And the more I'm doing Qigong, even now, like I've been reading and rereading different versions of the Tao Te Ching and think your Qigong practice is now you're embodying the essence of the Tao Te Ching, right? To try without trying. Like, what is that like?
Yeah.
Um, and and the effect being so strong, like you said, like barely moving, and yet you're breaking a sweat. Like, how
Yeah.
can this even happen?
And y'all just, little TMI here. I'm not a sweater.
Yeah, me
Like
neither.
I'm one of those people that like I have to be working hard or it's got to be real hot and humid out there for me to get sweaty. So if I'm doing a qigong practice and I'm like I'm getting dewy, that's why it stands out. It's remarkable because I'm like what the heck? Like
Mhm.
I have
Mhm.
never sweat this much in such a gentle practice.
Such a gentle practice. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's
I just loved it. I love practicing it outside. What I really found, and now here I'm going to go into a bit of woo-woo stuff here.
please
Um,
do.
my life totally changed when I started practicing Qigong on an external level, like um, who I was with changed, what kind of things I was doing in my life changed, I don't want to use the word manifest, but my external life started to change so rapidly when I started practicing Qigong. Um, it was almost as if I now started entering into a conversation with the universe. It was like as my vibration started to shift,
Mm-hmm.
everything else in my world
Mm-hmm.
shifted too,
Mm-hmm.
way faster than yoga. And I don't really know why. I think that yoga is still a powerful way to move energy, but maybe it was the subtlety, maybe it was um, the kind of being in direct communication with these kind of more esoteric meditations and movements. I don't really know why it happened, but my life changed rapidly after I started practicing Qigong. And I also started to open my eyes to more unseen realms. Like my intuition now is so on point to the point where like my partner thinks I'm a little bit of a witch. So there's some things where I'm like, I don't know. People and people come to me saying, Stephanie, I'm hearing things, I'm seeing things, I get these intuitions, I get these downloads, and I don't know what's happening. I'm like, you're practicing Qigong. Like it's a weird, it's like magic.
It's like clearing the crud out of what
Yes.
these pathways that were already there, right? So it's like
Yes.
when you clear these channels, then what was there as your innate gift as being born as a human
Right.
actually can be used.
Yes. And I think that the same can happen in things like Kundalini yoga. For me, Kundalini yoga was just a bit too destabilizing, but you're doing the same thing. You're clearing these main energetic highways that run from this, point of 1,000 meetings at the crown of the head, all the way down to Hui Yin into the bubbling well. Like you're just more open and receptive energetically to what is in, I guess, beyond the seen realms, is what I want to
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about how you moved from, so you went to yoga, you did your qigong, you
Mhm.
got your you did it was 4 years Qigong training kind of
Yeah.
ish. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I want to hear now, I want to start to dive into your book.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
want
of
to hear
course.
now so I don't even remember how I discovered you. Like, I'm sure it was on Instagram, but it
Could have
couldn't have
been.
just been because I don't ever just sit on Instagram and search through stuff. So it must have been that someone that I know or follow shared your post or something like that for me to end up clicking on it and then following you.
Mhm.
Um, and I've always really appreciated so if you're not following her, by the way, y'all, you should be. Um, I've always really appreciated your social media presence and your graphics and just the information that you share.
Mhm.
And but I don't remember how I found you. I honestly have no idea what the common thread was. But it's been, I mean, I think we've been connected on Instagram for years now. Um,
Mhm.
and so when I saw that you had a book, I was very excited because I
Yeah.
knew that it would be uh, deep but accessible
Mhm.
and stunning because that's
Mhm.
exactly how you represent on your social. You're
Mhm.
sharing these deep concepts, but you're doing it in a way where it's like, oh, okay, I could try that. It's not like, what? What did she just
Mhm.
say? And then the graphics that you have are always just absolutely stunning. So I just had a feeling. And then when I saw the book, I'm holding it up again for those on Instagram or who aren't, or sorry, or on YouTube.
Mhm.
Um, Even just in your images, I was like, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. And then
Mhm.
when I opened it up and saw all of the color and the
Mhm.
illustrations, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. And then, of course, it's also got a whole lot of substance. It's not just pretty to look at, but at the same time, it is pretty to look at,
Yeah.
which I'm a very visual person and I'm very color orientated. Um, Maybe that's why my previous career, I was a hair color expert. So I was a
Mm.
hairstylist. And maybe that's, I don't know. Maybe I had that before I became a hair color expert. And that's why I became really obsessed with hair color as opposed to just cutting. Who knows? But color for me is always something that will really draw me in. And this book is absolutely stunning.
Full color.
Yeah. And so I would love to hear how this little beauty came about.
Yeah, okay. So gosh, how far back should I go?
You can just do like a bullet point.
Bullet
Yeah.
point, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I started writing on Instagram, I guess when COVID happened. I just started writing all of these things, all of these threads that I talked about, the Qigong, the psychotherapy, the five spirits work, the Yin Yoga, the Qigong. I just started writing on my Instagram um, right around when COVID happened. And then I actually ended up losing my first Instagram account. I got hacked and I lost my entire
Oh,
account, which was sad. So gosh, that would have been 2022. I was on a, yeah, I was on a self retreat. I knew I wanted to read a book. When I came home after that self retreat, my Instagram was gone. And I
oh
was like, okay,
no.
there goes my business. Like it was really devastating.
It would be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I thought, well, maybe I have this counseling degree, maybe I'll just be a counselor. And so I was kind of starting up my counseling business, and so then I think it was my good friend Christine. She's like, just start again. She's like, just make an account with your name because it used to be Nosko Yoga. I was like
Mm-hmm,
yin teacher.
mm-hmm.
She's like, just make an account with your name and start again. So I did, but I had all this content that I'd written. And so I would
And
just
you still
post.
had it somewhere.
I still had it. I saved it. Yeah, on
Because
my
that's
camera.
my worst fear with that. And I better
Oh
touch wood as I say
gosh.
this, is that I don't save things really. I mean, I have some graphics and stuff, but like I don't save my writing or, anything that's posted on there. If it was gone, it would be
It'd
gone.
be gone.
Yeah.
Something to learn because I did lose everything. I lost my Facebook and everything. So I started again and it was like really slow. It was like one follower. It's my mom. Two followers, my
Thanks,
friend.
mom. Yeah.
It was so hard. But I just posted all this old stuff like quite rapidly. And within a month, I had over 100,000 followers, like exploded. Yoga Glow reached out to me. They signed me on. I was like, all of a sudden getting all this attention from the world. Like all of a sudden, people are really into qigong and what I'm writing. Like people want this.
Yeah.
Um, and so then I did a few other self retreats. One being an ayahuasca dieta where Yeah, it was very much a message that, this book that I'm writing is really for the earth. And I wanted it to be rooted in ecology. And then I did a vision fast in 2000, at the end of 2022, with the Animas Valley Institute with Bill Plotkin's work. He's amazing. If you don't know who he is, Bill
No, not
Plotkin,
heard of him.
full craft, really good. He's an eco-psychologist. So I did a vision fast with the intention of listening to the earth. That was my thing, is I wanted to fast and just listen on the land to what it wanted to say. Um, and I had a prayer. My prayer was, will this fast help me write the book? And when I got home after that vision fast, two separate publishers had reached out to me asking me to write a book proposal. So it was an invitation. It was an
Which
invitation.
almost never happens, y'all, for those of you who think.
It doesn't.
Yeah,
It's
it's
not,
like,
no.
yeah, very rarely does a publisher reach out to somebody and say, hey, we'd like you to write something for us. Yeah.
Yes. And both of them wanted it to be an illustrated book. Both of them, which was weird. It was like, that's more expensive to write an illustrated book. And anyway, so that's how it kind of came to be. And I knew that I wanted to write on the psycho-emotional aspects of the organs, and I knew I wanted it to be for the earth. And so, yeah, it kind of took shape um, over the course of about a year, and just sitting in nature, and of course, really inspired by many different teachers and authors. And there it was.
And were you pretty on the DL that you were writing a book? Because I don't remember you saying, I'm working on a book. It was just all of a sudden like you're sharing your material, and then all of a sudden on Instagram, bam, here's my
Book.
published book. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I might have mentioned it, but I wasn't overly public about it. Yeah, I wasn't overly public about it. So, uh, yeah, when it
I
came out,
think
it was
sometimes
very
people are
exciting.
public about these things because they want the accountability.
Yeah.
But it sounded like you obviously didn't need that. Like some people are like, I'm writing a book. They keep saying it so that people are like, hey, how's that book you're writing? So that
Mhm.
they kind of have to like put their stake in the ground and say, I'm doing this thing. But you obviously did not need that.
Well, I really do feel like this book wanted to come through. And
Mm-hmm.
one thing that my teacher Lori said is like, no one is going to write the book that you're meant to write. And
100%.
I think that everybody has a book in them, and it's just a matter of sitting down and doing it,
Yeah.
honestly. And for me, having the accountability of a publisher and deadlines, that really helped.
Yes.
And it's kind of funny how the book is called Follow Your Dao, because in writing this book, I think I really found my own voice. It's oftentimes, and this is actually a good message for yoga teachers too. Oftentimes we take a course or we listen to a podcast and we want to replicate in some way what
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
another person is saying, because it's like, oh, they said it, so it's valid. But the book really challenged me to find my own voice. And there's a level of vulnerability, I think, in that. And I will say that writing this book was one of the more vulnerable things I've ever done in my life. So,
I think every author would probably agree.
yeah.
Yeah. On that note, I have some questions and some
Sure.
ahas and some thoughts, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
I know you talk in the beginning of the book about how um, a lot of this book is based directly on what you've learned from your teachers, but that there also is a little bit of your own interpretation, your own spirit in it, which of
Mhm.
course there has to be, especially with something as ancient as Chinese medicine, where we don't have all the answers.
Mhm.
So there's a couple things that stood out to me. Uh, just because I'm a nerd, that
Yes, please.
that somebody else may not have
No
noticed.
noticed.
I noticed that you didn't mention the pericardium and the sanjiao,
Mhm.
and I'm wondering why that might be.
Oh. Um,
Were you trying to keep it more sort of concrete organ based as opposed to these more kind of vague concepts?
so this is the thing about writing a book. You only get a certain amount of pages.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote 90,000 words.
Ooh,
This book is only 55,000. So what I will say is the pericardium and the sanjiao didn't make the cut. So
gotcha.
so that's for the next book. I have already a
Beautiful.
second book idea. I think that because the heart is where the spirit resides.
Yeah.
where actually all of them reside, is in the heart. The heart could be its own book.
100%. Yeah.
So that's simply it. It's just it didn't make the cut. I think that there is a little tiny bit on the Sanjiao and the pericardium in the section on boundaries.
Yeah, you mentioned them. Yeah.
Very,
You kind
very
of
little.
wink towards them. Yeah. Yeah. Which was good.
But
I was like,
but
oh,
I
here they
didn't
are.
exactly, but I didn't include them in the chapters because I did want the book to follow the elements and
Yeah.
the spirits. And so
Yeah.
because the Sanjiao and the triple wormer are really in support of the spirit of the Shen, I
Yeah.
felt that it didn't deserve its own chapter. Does that make
Gotcha.
sense?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that stood out to me is that you mentioned when you're in the lungs, you mentioned the lung as a lower spirit, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Mhm.
was like, huh, I've never ever thought of the lungs as, I've always thought of them as an upper.
Right,
So that
because
was intriguing.
they live in the, this upper jiao
Upper jiao.
area.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the lungs themselves and the Po soul belongs to the underworld.
Ah,
It's the spirit of the body, right? So we have the two spirits that are the upper spirits, the Shen being the most yang. So if you think of fire being very yang, it's very flighty, it's the light of our awareness, then that comes down and kind of becomes a bit more dense into the Hun, which is about dreaming. So then it's going to take that insight and the awareness and like piece it together into dreams and plans.
mm-hmm,
And then you go
mm-hmm.
down into earth, and earth is about, okay, well, now what are you going to do about it? What are
Right.
those little things like where rubber meets the road? And now the lungs, when you go down into the lungs represent like our bodies and personal unconscious habit patterns. So
Gotcha.
then the alarm goes off to do your meditation or to write your book or whatever you're doing. And the pose like, oh, I don't know if I can. This is where the demons live, is
Mm,
actually in the lungs. Yeah. And not in the lungs as in the physical lung, but in the spirit of the lung. And we have to remember too, the lung is in the soma. The lung is represented in the whole soma and the skin.
yeah.
So, so yeah, it's a lower spirit. And then the je is the very bottom of the deep unconscious. It's the collective unconscious and the knowing in our bones.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Um, there was this part here that I just wanted to read about the Shen and the bird.
Mm.
I don't want to read the whole passage though, because that would be long. Um, this part. Um, like the little red bird, the Shen is able to intermittently venture out and return, creating a balanced rhythm of connection and retreat. Through this dynamic, the heart is able to express itself authentically, seek meaningful connections, and at the same time maintain its autonomy. It's a
Hmm.
beautiful metaphor for the dance that the heart performs, seeking both connection and retreat.
Yeah.
I love that. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because often when you hear about, and this will be a podcast for a whole other episode some other time, but when you hear about, each of us have all five of the spirits in us, but that some people tend to be more fire, some people tend to be
Yes.
more wood. And whenever you hear about fire people, oftentimes there's this idea of fire people are like the forever extrovert. They're like always want to be around people. They always, kind of need that kind of like when they're, I've even read one book where they were like, when fire people are alone, they don't have joy. So I loved
Mm.
this reference that you made here about this ability to be able to do connection and retreat.
Retreat.
And this is what I'm always trying to teach my students that are the summer bunnies, the ones that just live all year for summer and they go to every festival and they do all the things and la 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 la. It's like, whoa, 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 yeah. But you can burn yourself out here, little flame.
Hmm.
Like we need to
Hmm.
also pull in and have quiet time. So I just thought that was a beautiful way to put it.
Hmm.
Loved that.
Yeah, because if there's no retreat also, as then we're a bit confused about what our truth is versus another's, that
right?
like seeking
Yes.
external validation. Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is that balance between out and in.
Yeah, the only way that you can know if it's your own sovereign heart speaking
Hmm.
is if you actually spend time quietly with your own sovereign heart. Yeah. I
Hmm.
wish I mean, my wish for the world is that more people do that.
Yeah.
Because I think there's so much of people
Yeah.
just adopting what everybody else is saying and
Yes.
thinking, and, not
Yeah. And
pausing to
that
see, does this resonate for me?
exactly. And it's, because that's what the Shen wants to do. It wants to reach out to connect. But what I've been sitting with is when we can maintain our autonomy, that actually leads to more authentic connection because
Totally.
there's a difference between me and you. If I was
Yes.
you and you were me, then there would be nothing to connect.
And authentic connection, as
Authentic
opposed to
can
just
exactly of
showing
just,
up in
oh,
body and
people.
not in spirit.
Mhm.
Yeah, beautiful. A couple other things that I noticed that were just different from what I have learned is that, did you put courage with the lung? You did, right?
Mhm.
And I've always learned it as the gallbladder.
It can be both. And I
Yeah.
think this
But
is
but
the
when you're
thing.
talking about this
Yeah.
deeper aspect of the lung, it makes a lot of sense to me. Like, because
Mhm.
at first when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But then when I read the chapter, it was like, okay, I see what you mean by the sort of depth of the lungs and the
Mhm.
sort of shadow and
And
that
being
kind of
willing to
courage.
face, yeah, being willing to face shadow, being willing also to put everything on the line to stand up for what you believe in and what you value,
It's more of
right?
like that inner resolve and courage. Whereas I feel like sometimes gallbladder is more of that like dun, 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 charge kind of courage, as
Exactly.
opposed to that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm going to have the courage to follow my dreams. That
Yes.
would be more liver versus I'm going to have the courage to dig into the unconscious of my past so that I can act out of greatest integrity.
That would
That's
be
more
lung.
lung.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
And a lot of these you see as both. Like, there's somebody said, oh, what's the difference between the compassion of the liver and the sympathy of the spleen? Right.
Good question.
And then somebody said, well, what's the difference? Like I think I put love once underneath the liver, and people was like, well, where's in that heart? And then I realized I'm like, love can actually be expressed through all of the organ energy,
Yes.
right? Like to be safe would be like the wish of the kidneys, and
Yes.
to be free from harm would be that the wish of the liver, and to be nourished would be that of the spleen, right?
Yeah.
To live in integrity, right? So they all have virtue and they're
It's
all in
almost like
service of love.
each organ has its own love language.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
I love
Yes.
that. That's
Yeah.
perfect. Each organ has its own love language, but you do see crossover, and there is like obviously room for poetic interpretation in all of it. Mm.
This is this other part that I wanted to read because I was just like, I mean, you couldn't see it because you weren't with me, but I was like shouting from the rooftops as I read this. This is from Fear to Faith. It's lastly, one of the fastest ways to deplete your Jing is by striving to be someone you are not.
Mhm.
This could show up in trying to change your core personality traits to fit into a certain relationship or career, or doing activities that, air quotes, should be healthy, but that you just really don't have an affinity for. If you don't love yourself, you might feel like you have to take up another expression, but the consequence, the extra energy needed, will drain your life force in the same way that overwork will.
Mhm.
I was like, can we just put that on a billboard, please? So
So
that
true.
one, I just, yeah, really, really, really stood out because I work so much with yoga teachers, both in training them in yin, but also in business mentorship. And I see this come up so often. And I understand that when you're a brand new teacher, maybe you're new. And so you are kind of like parroting what your teachers have said,
Mhm.
but at a point, you have to start to speak from your own essence, your own experience. I remember one of my teachers told me this at my very first teacher training, and it's the thing they say at the beginning of every teacher training that I do. Some of the things that I say here I don't like to use the word trigger because I feel it's so overused right now, may push a button. Let's put it that way. In this course. And when it does, pause and investigate that. So before you push it away, no, that's not right, because it doesn't fit with what I believed before I walked in this room. But also, don't automatically accept what I say, because it might not be your truth. So she always said, question it. Does this feel true? If I get still and quiet with myself, even though this thing kind of pushed my button or tweaked me, does it feel true? Is there a truth there? And if so, now you get to go investigate that. And why did that poke that button then, if this is true? If it doesn't, she said, get rid of it. It's not yours. It's not for you. And so I think that quote really kind of hit that nail for me. I was like, wow. Yeah. So I would love that to be something that all teachers do. I often joke I did it just this last weekend when I was with my teacher trainees. I said, there's no right or wrong way to sequence yin. However, for your next assignment, there is a right or wrong way. And then what you do when you're out of this program, just party on with yourself, as long as you're being conscious and intentional and thoughtful about it, as long as you're taking that time to pause and to listen before you, exactly. We're in such a world right now in general of people not being authentic. The fear of cancel culture alone for people is, people are so afraid to speak their truth right now.
Yes. And
understandably.
Yes. And I think it's hard to hear the truth, because the Shen is going out. The Shen is going out to find it somewhere else.
Yes.
So yes, we want to listen. And you bring up such a good point. It's like the point of a teacher is to disrupt your current worldview.
100%.
And to shake it up in there. But then at the end of the day, you have to listen. And that what I just said earlier about how do we know what the masters taught is correct, right? If all of this is, hearsay from history books, which was, by the way, written by him, right? A lot of this is from the patriarchy. So it's like we're sifting through all of these teachings. Okay, we take the teaching in, let it disrupt the our worldview. And then from that place of experience and practice and how it's actually landed in our life, then from there we find our true voice.
Yeah.
But we actually have to practice it first. We have to practice something. We have to let our worldview be disrupted.
And people are in such a rush to find that too.
That's right.
It might take time.
It takes time. And that's the wisdom of the kidneys, right? Is to take the time to let things land, to practice them. And then it's like another thing about the kidneys is it's about divine timing. So it's about aligning heaven's will with personal will. Like people think of the spirit of the kidneys is called the je, right? And it means will. But it's really about aligning this greater will of heaven, but it's also of earth, right? It's who we're meant to be. My teacher, Lori, calls it this entelechy, who we're meant to grow into on a very physical level. Like there's physical energy to go in certain directions. Like some people just have a natural affinity for certain things, and that's also a body thing. But it's matching that will with the will of timing, of place, of situations. It's really and it takes patience.
So your book is a perfect example of that.
Yes.
You went away, you dove deep, you kind of had this like, I'd like to write a book thing in your head. You came home and the universe was like, hey, here's a couple opportunities, choose one.
Right. And then on my Yi spirit, the Yi being about, day in and day out, getting up and doing the thing, even though you don't feel like doing it, that was very much involved, right? I had to write the to-do lists and follow through on those actions.
Yep.
The Yi and the stomach and spleen is very much about devotion. It takes an incredible amount of devotion to manifest anything in our life.
Yes.
And then, of course, then my lung spirit was like, oh my gosh, I'm an imposter. I can't do this, right? It's all the demons that come up around self-worth issues. And, so it was funny in the experience of writing the book. I really got to live through all of the spirits, right? It felt like the book was writing me in some ways.
I don't know if you had this fear. I know that I always have this fear about sitting down and finally getting a book done. because I'm always an ever growing, changing, learning being, I'm often afraid that what if what I put on paper now, 5 years from now, I'm like, that's not how I would have said that actually. Or, I don't really know if I believe that anymore. Or, that probably was, not the best way to put that, or something like that. And I mean, so I don't really have like a feeling often of imposter syndrome, but I do have a feeling of like, once this is here in print, that's forever. And what happens if you're lucky enough as an author, 10 years later, your publisher says your book did so well, do you want to do like an updated kind of, right? And then you have that opportunity. But for a lot of books, you never do, right? So for example, one small example might be me really diving deep currently right now into Chinese medicine versus TCM, and already looking at my manual and going, oh, there's some tweaks I want to make there now that I have this broader understanding. And I just think that's going to happen for my whole life because I'm a nerd and I always want to learn more and grow more. And, so did you have any of that fear coming up where it was like, oh, now this is in writing?
Yeah, I mean, I have that right now. Like, I already have that. I'm like, oh, I would
Yeah.
have written that differently. And so
Yes.
I think it's taking the pressure off of your book, especially your first book doesn't have to be everything,
Yeah.
right? It's just represents a small sliver of where you are in your process, and knowing that that place in your process might help people, right? Because,
Yeah.
now I'm here in a little bit later on in my process, but there's a lot of people that maybe are where I was. And
Yes.
that place will reach people and help people. And then there's the next thing. Then there's the next book,
The next book. Exactly.
right?
The next course, the next,
Then
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So there's definitely, um, I would highly recommend the experience of writing a book. It was transformative on a personal level for me.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think maybe we'll slowly start to wrap things up.
Sure.
I would love to do some icebreaker questions with you
Sure.
that I do
Mhm.
always to close with guests. And then after that, I'd love for you to share your parting prayer that's in the book, if you don't
Sure.
mind reading it, because
Yeah, of course.
it's so lovely. Okay. So some of these questions are light and some of them are, slightly more soulful. Of course, no right or wrong answers. Coffee or tea?
How do I choose?
I know. I
I
can't.
think I have, oh gosh. So I actually practice Taiwanese, like a form of tea service, Chinese tea service. So I think I'd have to say tea.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know that one was actually impossible for me as well to choose. It's
Yeah.
like
But I also love coffee. I love both of them.
the answer is it depends.
Depends.
Favorite ice cream flavor? Now I realize in TCM we don't eat a lot of cold things, but just imagine.
Mhm. Oh, uh, ooh. I would have to say just a regular vanilla.
Nice.
Yeah.
One thing people often get wrong about me.
Hmm. My height.
Nice.
Yeah, a lot of people they meet me like in person after like following me on Instagram or on my glow classes, and they're like, I always thought you'd be taller. Like, no,
I
I'm
get that
only
all the
five
time
three.
too.
Yeah.
I think somehow in people's minds, if you're intelligent and confident, they just think you're taller.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even my husband, we were dating for like 6 months and he's like, what are you, 5'7"? And I was like, no, 5'3" on a good day.
You're like, when
Anyway,
I'm standing up straight.
yeah.
Um, when I'm not practicing Qigong, I am
Oh, walking in the forest.
excellent. Do you have a pop culture vice? A book series, a show, a movie series, something that you just
Oh,
cannot resist?
okay. This is kind of a weird one. The Last Avatar.
Mm,
That show is like a cartoon.
I
I don't
haven't
know if
seen
you.
it,
Oh
but
my
no.
gosh, you'd like it. It's like this
Okay.
cartoon with like the different they're like different tribes of the elements.
Oh, cool. Did you
Yeah,
say
and it's a
last or
cartoon. The
lost
last
of it?
the last
Lost.
Avatar.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'll check
watch
it
it.
out.
It's so good.
It's the
Yeah.
perfect kind of thing to do over the holiday break for me, is to dive into some new show. Otherwise, it's
Yeah.
like I can't, I want to watch it all.
Yeah.
Um, one weird fact about you.
Oh, um, like how weird does it have to be?
Well, whatever you want to share,
Oh, um,
whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
a weird fact about me. Oh, well, it's not really weird. It's more interesting.
Okay.
I made up my last name.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Nosko is Latin for, it's like the Latin equivalent of gnosis, which means knowledge of spiritual mysteries. And I chose it just after I went through a separation and I didn't want to go back to my maiden name. And I just chose it.
Most people don't know this about me, but I also chose my last name.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
We
Yep.
have strangely a lot in common.
Relationship and all that stuff,
Yeah.
right? It was
Yeah.
like I was doing a lot of stage work at the time
Yeah.
and doing hair, and I just thought, and I've always hated my middle name, so I was like, well, if I'm going to change my name, why don't I just choose
Change
one?
it.
Now my first name is the same. Just changed the
Yeah.
spelling slightly, but my
Mine too.
last name, I got rid of my middle name. And then, yeah, I chose my last name. It took me a year of, I mean, it is an actual word. It's,
Hmm.
well, Danu is like the Celtic water goddess, and it's a
Yeah.
whole Celtic thing there. But yeah, interesting. Yeah,
Hmm.
I also did the same. I was like, well, if I'm going to pay all this money to
Yeah.
get new
It's,
ID, to do the legal name
yep.
change, I got to change all my bank accounts. I'm going to choose a name that that I feel fits me. Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool. What the world needs now is,
Love.
yeah, that's always my answer too.
Yeah.
Um, one thing I wish people knew about Yin Yoga.
That it's actually Qigong.
Nice.
They're not different.
They're not separate.
No.
Um, is there anything that I forgot to ask you about that you want to add? I mean, of
Hmm.
course, I'm going to give you an opportunity to give your website and all that business. Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm. I don't think so. I think that felt, yeah, that felt really complete to me. It was a nice
beautiful.
conversation. Hmm.
So, friends that are listening, we always do a an opportunity for Stephanie to share where she's at, all of that, but also want to mention her and I are working on a book giveaway.
Hmm.
We cannot give you all the details in this episode because I mean, it's a good position to be in, but her book is currently out of print because they sold too many. So we're kind of waiting on shipping and things like that. But if you are interested in winning a copy of this book, head over to my Instagram and Stephanie's Instagram, both of which will be linked in the show notes, but you can also say it out in a moment. And there will be details about the giveaway there. So it'll be an Instagram giveaway, and you could get yourself a book. So
Yes.
that, and then let us know your website and your Instagram and where people can find you.
Yeah, sure. So my website is my name, stephanienosco.com. And on my website, I have various online courses you can take. Sometimes I run them live, a lot of them are on demand. And I specifically go into the topics of Chinese medicine, the emotions and the organs, kind of a blend of yin and Qigong. And my Instagram is just my name, Stephanie Nosco. And
Beautiful.
my book is Follow Your Dao, and you can buy it on anywhere you get your books.
All the places.
All the places.
And it's incredibly I'm just going to say this, like, I'm not trying to blow smoke up Stephanie's ass here. I actually really love this book.
Thank
um
you.
Not only is it gorgeous, it's accessible and has depth all at the same time, and that is not
Mm,
an easy task, to make these
thank
esoteric concepts coherent
you.
to
Mhm.
the average everyday person. So
Mm,
well done on that.
thank
And for
you.
those of you that are yin yoga nerds and love Chinese medicine, if that's something that really interests you, you're going to get so much from reading this book.
Mm.
Sometimes I get a book and I read it, and then I'll interview the person, and then eventually their book ends up in the one that goes to the used bookstore later pile. But this one's staying.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you so much for
it's so
saying that.
gorgeous.
And
Yeah,
I will say that one of my missions, I guess, especially as to share with the yoga teaching world is Really encouraging people to learn the principles behind the meridians, and that includes the elemental archetypes and the spirits of them, right? And then using that to, as I walk in the room, how can I trust my own Shen now in my body? How can I keep my Shen in my body, speak from that truth, and then also having the skills to feel into a room and pulling what might be needed from a deeper well of understanding of Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my
Yeah.
niche. And
Yeah.
I think
It's
it is
not,
yours too.
yes.
Yeah.
I often just say, if people, if you've only dabbled in a tiny bit of knowledge in TCM, if you've only heard about your meridians in your 50 hour, that's not the time to share them.
Not the time. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Use them as inspiration for your own path.
Mhm.
Deepen your study if you feel passionate
Yeah.
about these things. But please don't feel pressure to make a video for the kidney bladder meridian when you don't really understand why someone might want to work with their kidney bladder meridian.
Exactly.
It's please stop doing that,
Exactly. And
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I do, and a lot of questions come in about the teacher training I run, because I don't run general yin teacher trainings. I don't. The course that I run is about, okay, how are we going to take the psycho-emotional aspects of the organs to deepen our yin yoga offerings.
Beautiful.
So that you can check out that information on my website as well.
Awesome. So friends, I have asked Stephanie to share the parting prayer at the end of her book because I think it is so beautiful. So if you are in a place like I am, where you can get comfortable, sit tall, close your eyes, maybe bring your hands to your heart if that feels right for you, please do. If you are not able to do that because you are currently driving, please just bookmark this and come back to a point where you can be standing or seated and be present to this without slamming into other cars.
Yes. The way I always say it, Nick, is, you listen to poetry and a prayer, something like this, like you listen to rain, or like you listen to a babbling brook. So it's like that
Beautiful.
non-clinging way of listening. And
Okay.
the style of this writing, I will say, also was inspired by John O'Donohue. I don't know if you know him and his work, but the style of it is very John O'Donohue. So.
Oh, he's amazing. Okay. When you're ready, my friend.
A parting prayer. May your heart guide you towards the truth of who you are. May joy expand you into a wider circle of connection where your light can be seen and celebrated. May your liver move you in the direction of your dreams, giving you the tenacity to stand up for the benefit of all. May compassion hold you in your imperfection, patiently supporting you in your growth. May your spleen center your resolve in each steady step of the journey, grounding your intentions with constancy into your thoughts, words, and actions. May you remember Earth as your original mother and allow yourself to fully receive her nourishment. May your lungs hold on to what is precious and help you release when the time is right. May grief act as a teacher for deeper love and understanding of what it means to be mortal. May your kidneys instill faith in the fertile darkness, helping you navigate the unknown. May fear help safeguard your resources and challenge you to emerge into your most authentic expression.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So beautiful. We'll say our proper goodbyes once I stop the recording. But for those of you that are listening, thank you and bye for now.